Turn it over now to Gene Hamilton, Vice President of America First Legal and former General Counselor to the Attorney General. All right, you've read this indictment. What do you make of these charges?
Jesse, thanks for having me on. These charges are politically motivated, like no charges we have ever seen before in this country. This indictment reads like it was written by Adam Schiff himself or by the January 6th committee itself. It's a rehashing of a bunch of First Amendment protected activity, describing things that the president said and did, and drawing conclusions and pushing forward with legal claims against legal counts against Donald Trump, saying that he violated a criminal law because he questioned the outcome of an election, because he questioned different things that a lot of Americans also had questions about. And so we're in a situation now where dissent, where political speech is being criminally prosecuted at the highest levels against the primary political opponent of the sitting president of the United States. If that doesn't shock you, I don't know what will.
So how's this trial going to work? They're going to have Trump prove or disprove election fraud, and the federal government's going to have to say the election was clean? Is this what we're going to do at trial?
Well, Jesse, one of the elements that the government has to establish at trial on each of the counts is knowledge. That's to show intent. And what the government alleges in the indictment is that Donald Trump knew that all of these things he was saying were completely false, that somehow Donald Trump knew that all of these elections were completely perfect, they were clean, they were the best elections ever. And they even cited all kinds of different reports that arose after the election to say, oh, he clearly had knowledge that everything in this election was great. But the problem is that Donald Trump apparently had a lot of questions about the election, like a lot of people did. And so saying that you knew that the results were false is not exactly the same as saying that you can't have questions. And so what's going to happen at trial is the government's going to have to carry its burden to prove a bunch of these different counts, each of the elements of these different counts, including knowledge, including all kinds of other components. And as I think you rightly pointed out, one of the counts he's facing is a conspiracy charge under the statute that was used to prosecute members of the KKK after the Civil War. I mean, they are really stretching. They are really stretching to find crimes to meet what they want to do. They want to rehash all these old things that the left has always wanted to do. They want to bring Donald Trump. They want to drag him into jail, and they're going to go anywhere they can, do anything they can do to do so.
So if they're saying that the certification was delayed a couple hours because of the January 6th protesters, they're saying that's conspiracy to obstruct an official proceeding. You're delaying an action in the Senate and the House for a couple hours. That's a 5-year prison sentence for delaying a proceeding? I mean, anytime Code Pink goes into a hearing and holds up crazy signs and blows whistles and slows things down, that's a 5-year prison sentence?
Right. I mean, it's the results are absurd. And of course, the other thing is that you still have to show the existence of an actual conspiracy between Donald Trump and other folks who acted in furtherance of that. And I don't think that the government's going to be able to prove that, regardless of all of the word vomit that they put on their indictment. It's not going to be possible. They're not going to be able to carry their burden. If they succeed in getting a conviction in the district court, there is a 0% chance that this thing stands on appeal, particularly at the Supreme Court of the United States. There's already been a lot of questions raised by a very prominent conservative judge on the D.C. Circuit about two of the counts, the statute underlying two of the counts that they're charging Donald Trump with. I think that people should pay attention to what the government is trying to do here. They should pay attention to the fact that this is a politically motivated prosecution, and they should be able to contact their legislatures and their senators and everyone else and ask them to hold the Department of Justice accountable.
All right, Gene, thanks so much.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.